Hello, and welcome back to Let's Play The Elder Scrolls III, Morrowind, Game of the Year Edition. Once again, it is story time. Fedar has encountered quite a few more books during his travels, and now he needs to catch up on his reading. Let's start with the books that he's got in his inventory right now. Bone, Part 1, by Tavi Dromio. It seems to me, said Garaz, thoughtfully looking into the depths of his flint, that all great ideas come from pure happenstance. Take, for instance, the story I told you last night about my cousin. If he hadn't fallen off that horse, he never would have become one of the Empire's foremost alchemists. It was late one Middos night at the King's Ham, and the regulars were always especially inclined toward philosophy. I disagree, replied Xiomara, firmly but politely. Great ideas and inventions are most often formed slowly, over time, by diligence and hard work. If you'll recall my tale from last month, the young lady, who I assure you is based on a real person, only recognized her one true love after she had slept with practically everyone in North Point. I put it to you that neither is the case, said Hallgerd, pouring a topper on his mug of grief. The greatest inventions are created by extraordinary need. Must I remind you of the story I told some time ago about Arslic Owen and the invention of bone mold? The problem with your theory is that your example is entirely fictional, sniffed Xiomara. I don't believe I remember the story of Arslic Owen and the invention of bone mold, frowned Garaz. Are you sure you told us? Well, this happened many, many, many years ago, when Vardenfell was a beauteous green land, when Dunmer were Chimer, and Dwemer and Nord lived together in relative peace when they weren't trying to kill one another, Hallgerd relaxed in his chair, warming to his theme. When the sun and moons all hung in the sky together, Lord, Mother, and Wizard, grumbled Xiomara. If I'm going to be forced to hear your ridiculous story again, pray don't embellish and make it any longer than it has to be. This all happened in Vardenfell quite some time ago, said Hallgerd, ignoring Xiomara's interruption with admirable restraint, during an era of a king you would never have heard of. Arslic Owen was one of this king's nobles, and a very, very disagreeable fellow. Because of his allegiance to the crown, the king had felt the need to grant him a castle and land, but he didn't necessarily want him as a neighbor, so the land he granted was far from civilization, right in an area of Vardenfell that is, even today, not quite civilized to this day. Arslic Owen built a walled stronghold and settled down with his unhappy slaves to enjoy a quiet, if somewhat grim, life. It was not long before his stronghold's integrity was tested. A tribe of cannibalistic Nords had been living in the valley for some time, mostly dining on one another, but occasionally foraging for what they liked to call dark meat, the Dunmer. Xiomara laughed with appreciation. Marvelous! I don't remember that from before. It's funny how you don't hear much about the Nords' rampant cannibalism nowadays. This was obviously, as I've said, quite some time ago, said Hallgerd, glaring at part of his audience with civil malevolence, and things were in many ways quite different. These cannibalistic Nords began attacking Arslic Owen's slaves in the fields, and then slowly grew bolder until they held the very stronghold itself under siege. They were quite a fearsome sight, you can imagine, a horde of wild-eyed men and women with dagger-like teeth filed to tear flesh, wielding massive clubs, cloaked only in the skins of their victims. Arslic Owen assumed that if he ignored them, they'd go away. Unfortunately, the first thing that the Nords did was to poison the stream that carried water into the walled stronghold. All the livestock and most of the slaves died very quickly before this was discovered. There was no hope of rescue, at least for several months, when the king's emissaries would come reluctantly to visit the disagreeable vassal. The next closest source of water was on the other side of the hill, so Arslic Owen sent 3 of his slaves with empty jugs to bring some back. They were beaten with clubs and eaten before they were a few feet outside the stronghold gates. The next group he sent through he gave sticks to defend themselves. They made it a few feet farther, but were also overwhelmed, beaten, and devoured. It was obvious that better personal defensive was required. Arslic Owen went to talk to his armorer, one of his few slaves with specific talents and duties. The slaves need armor if they're going to make it to the river and back, he said. Collect every scrap of steel and iron you can find, every hinge, knife, ring, cup, everything that isn't needed to keep the walls sturdy. Smelt it, and give me the most and best armor you can, very, very quickly. The armorer, whose name was Gorkith, was used to Arslic Owen's demands, and knew that there could be no compromise on the quality and quantity of the armor, or the speed at which he worked. He labored for 30 hours without a break, and recall, without any water to slake his thirst as he struggled with the kiln and anvil, until finally he had 6 suits of mixed metal armor. 6 slaves were chosen, clad in the armor, and sent with jars to collect river water. At first, the mission progressed well. The Nords attacked the armored slaves with their clubs, but they continued their march forward, warding off the blows. Gradually, however, the slaves seemed to be walking uncertainly, dazed by the endless barrage. Eventually, one by one, they fell, the armor was peeled from their bodies, and they were eaten. "The slaves couldn't move quickly enough in that heavy armor you made," said Arslic Owen to Gorkith. "I need you to collect all the cadavers of the poisoned livestock, strip their skin, and give me the most and the best leather armor you can, very, very quickly." Gorkith did as he was told, though it was a particularly repulsive task given the rancid state of the livestock. Normally it takes quite a time to treat and cure leather, so I understand, but Gorkith worked at it tirelessly, and in a half a day he had 12 suits of leather armor. 12 slaves were chosen, clad in the armor, and sent with jars to collect river water. They progressed at first much better than the earlier expedition. 2 fell almost immediately, but the others had some luck outmaneuvering their assailants while deflecting an occasional blow of the club. Several got to the river, 3 were able to fill up their jars, and 1 fellow very nearly made it back to the stronghold gates. Alas, he fell and was eaten. The Nords possessed a remarkably healthy appetite. "What we need before I completely run out of slaves," said Arslic Owen thoughtfully to Gorkith, "is an armor sturdier than leather, but lighter than metal." The armorer had already considered that and taken stock of the materials available. He had thought about doing something with stone or wood, but there were practical problems with demolishing more of the stronghold. The next most prevalent stuff present in the stronghold was skinned dead bodies, hunks of muscle, fat, blood, and bone. For 6 hours, he toiled relentlessly until he produced 18 suits of bone mold, the first ones ever created. Arslic Owen was somewhat dubious at the sight and smell, but he was very thirsty and willing to sacrifice another 18 slaves if necessary. "Might I suggest," Gorkith queried tremulously, "having the slaves practice moving about in the armor here in the courtyard before sending them to face the Nords?" Arslic Owen coolly allowed it, and for a few hours the slaves wandered about the stronghold courtyard in their suits of bone mold. They grew used to the give of the joints, the rigidity of the backplate, the weight pushed onto their shoulders and hips. They discovered how to plant their feet slightly askew to keep their balance steady, how to quickly turn, pivoting without falling down, how to break into a run and stop quickly. By the time they were sent out of the castle gates, they were easily, very nearly, almost amateurs in the use of their medium-weight armor. 17 of them were killed and eaten, but 1 made it back with a jar of water. "It's perfect nonsense," said Xiomara, "but my point is still valid even so. Like all great inventors, even in fiction, the armorer worked diligently to create the bone mold." "I think there was a good deal of happenstance as well," frowned Goraz. "But it is an appalling story. I wish you hadn't told me." "If you think that's appalling," grinned Hallgerd, "you should hear what happened next." Well, that was lovely. Now let's read the book that Ifka gave Fedar when he joined the Imperial cult. For My Gods and Emperor, a handbook for the Imperial cult. What is the Imperial cult? The missionary arm of the Great Faiths, the Imperial cult brings divine inspiration and consolation to the Empire's remote provinces. The cults combine the worship of the 9 divines, the Aedra Akatosh, Dibella, Arche, Zenithar, Mara, Stendar, Kinnereth, and Julianos, and the Talos cult, veneration of the divine god hero Tiber Septim, founder and patron of the Empire. Imperial cult priests provide worship and services for all these gods at imperial shrines in settlements throughout Vardenfell. What is the virtuous life? Our doctrines are simple. We acknowledge the divinity of the 9 divines: Akatosh, Dibella, Arche, Zenithar, Mara, Stendar, Kinnereth, Julianos, and Tiber Septim. We preach the 9 virtues: humility, inspiration, piety, work, compassion, justice, ambition, learning, and civility. Our Emperor is the defender of the faith, and the Empire is the worldly working of the divine plan. We pledge aid and comfort to all citizens in need and serve the Emperor and Empire at his will. The Imperial cults look to the 9 divines as models for living a good and virtuous life. Each of the 9 represents different aspects of life and how it should be lived. But the simplest statement of our doctrines is help and protect one another. The stronger one is, the wealthier one is, the more one bears responsibility for helping and protecting others. One's first duty, of course, is to one's fellow members of the imperial cult. But after that, one should help and protect any needy persons. We also say, do not harm one another. It is forbidden to attack another person of the imperial cult, and of course, forbidden to kill another member. It is forbidden to steal from another member, whether by open theft or by covert pickpocketing. It is forbidden to trespass upon the private property of another member. Break any one of these rules and be expelled from the cult. How can I join the imperial cult? The imperial cult accepts all citizens of good character and earnest faith. We ask only a one-time pledge of 50 drakes to aid us in our good works. Thereafter, the only cost of membership comes when you use our health, healing, and blessing shrines, modest fees which help us spread the blessings of the Nine to those less fortunate than ourselves. Those who wish to join the imperial cult in Vardenfell will find a warm welcome from our cult greeters. Ifka at Fort Pelagiad, Siloria Ceruleolus at Buckmoth Legion Fort, Somutis Vunis at Moonmoth Legion Fort, Ruchia Kanikian in the Grand Council Chambers in Ebonheart, or Lalatia Varian in the Imperial Chapels at Ebonheart. What are the requirements for advancement in the imperial cult? Seekers who wish to advance in the service of the Nine must dedicate time and resources to serving the cult, and must strive for personal improvement in their attributes and skills. Only the most distinguished are worthy of advancement to the higher ranks in the imperial cults. To serve and glorify the Nine Divines, the faithful must cultivate a noble personality and a strong will. Respect the magical arts, especially the colleges of restoration, mysticism, and conjuration. Those who swear to avoid bloodshed, to take the field unarmored, to fight only with blunt weapons, are especially praiseworthy. Knowledge of enchantments and the gift of diplomatic speech are other qualities we value in our initiates. Imperial Cult Services. You can find Imperial Cult services in Buckmoth Legion Fort, Moonmoth Legion Fort, Pelagiad Legion Fort, Nisus Legion Fort, Wolverine Hall in Sadrith Mora, Vivek Foreign Quarter, and Imperial Chapels in Ebonheart. Seek training at Wolverine Hall, Buckmoth Fort, Moonmoth Fort, Ebonheart Imperial Chapels, Governor's Hall in Caldera, and Ald-Vilathi Outpost. Many Imperial Cult locations have healing altars. You may pray at Imperial Cult healing altars and receive blessings which cure common and blight diseases, cure poisons, and restore damaged attributes. Non-members pay 25 drakes. Non-members pay 25 drakes. Newer members pay 10 drakes, while higher-ranking members receive blessings free. Healing altars are found in Vivek Foreign Quarter, Wolverine Hall in Sadrith Mora, Buckmoth Legion Fort, Moonmoth Legion Fort, Pelagiad Legion Fort, Nisus Legion Fort, and Imperial Chapels in Ebonheart. Opportunities for service. Lay healers gather ingredients for health and healing potions and minister to the sick and hurt in poor and isolated communities. It is difficult and sometimes dangerous work, but the spiritual rewards are great. Lay healers need only the skills of the prudent traveler, being often on the road and in the wilderness gathering herbs and potion components. They should avoid trouble where possible, and so need not be masters of the arts of war. Those interested should speak to Sinolian Tuniphis at the Imperial Chapels in Ebonheart. Almoners gather alms from members and friends of the faith. We depend on donations to fund most of our good works. Almoners who are successful at bringing in generous donations may rise in the ranks of Imperial Cult's service. Almoners must travel in town and village and should be skilled in persuasion and mercantile matters. Also, almoners with personal wealth are in a position to better serve the cult. Those interested should speak to Iulis Troopter at the Imperial Chapels in Ebonheart. A shrine sergeant helps keep order at the shrines, carries messages and packages, and sometimes escorts priests and lay servants on dangerous missions. This occasional service is ideal for bold, free-spirited adventurers. Shrine sergeants are called upon to serve the Nine with weapon, armor, and spell. New shrine sergeants are given the easiest tasks, but later, missions may demand higher levels of combat proficiency. Those interested should speak to Kay at the Imperial Chapels in Ebonheart. Oracle's quests are the most demanding of all Imperial Cult missions. Only members of the higher ranks are invited to assist the Oracle, and the challenges require the skill and courage found only in heroes of legend. How do the Imperial Cults view the other factions of Vardenfell? The Imperial Cults have a very close relationship with the Imperial Legions, and a friendly and supportive relationship with the Imperial Guilds, especially the Fighters and Mages Guilds. We also have a friendly and supportive relationship with House Hlalu, which strongly supports the Emperor and Imperial principles. Though we cannot condone the actions of the Thieves Guild, we praise their faithful dedication to the Emperor and to Imperial culture. The Imperial cults have the greatest respect for the high moral principles of House Redoran and the Morag Tong, and honors their different but noble conceptions of divine inspiration. We disapprove of the primitive heathen beliefs of the Ashlanders and of the impious and inhumane practices of the Telvanni. The Imperial cult especially disapproves of the practice of slavery and looks forward to the day when slavery is illegal in all Imperial provinces. The Imperial cult also disapproves of the lawless and greedy Kamona Tong and their ruthless exploitation of the poor and weak. Historically, our relationship with the Tribunal Temple is difficult and unfriendly. Though the Imperial cult acknowledges the lords and saints of the Temple pantheon as worthy inspirations, the Temple falsely insists that theirs is the one true faith and that the Imperial cults worship false gods. Yeah, that was definitely a rehash of all the things that Ifka told Fedar when he was weighing whether or not he wanted to join the Imperial cult, but that's okay, there were some more details this time. Let's head into here. The Black Arrow, Part 1, by Gorgic Gwyn. I was young when the Duchess of Woda hired me as an assistant footman at her summer palace. My experience with the ways of the titled aristocracy was very limited before that day. There were wealthy merchants, traders, diplomats, and officials who had large operations in Eldenroot and ostentatious palaces for entertaining, but my relatives were all far from those social circles. There was no family business for me to enter when I reached adulthood, but my cousin heard that an estate far from the city required servants. It was so remotely located that there were unlikely to be many applicants for the positions. I walked for 5 days into the jungles of Valenwood before I met a group of riders going my direction. They were 3 Bosmer men, 1 Bosmer woman, 2 Breton women, and a Dunmer man, adventurers from the look of them. "Are you also going to Molova?" asked Prolissa, one of the Breton women, after we had made our introductions. "I don't know what that is," I replied. "I'm seeking a domestic position with the Duchess of Woda." "We'll take you to her gate," said the Dunmer Missin Aiken, pulling me up to his horse. "But you would be wise not to tell Her Grace that students from Molova escorted you. Not unless you don't really want the position in her service." Aiken explained himself as we rode on. Molova was the closest village to the Duchess's estate, where a great and renowned archer had retired after a long life of military service. His name was Hiomaste, and though he was retired, he had begun to accept students who wished to learn the art of the bow. In time, when word spread of the great teacher, more and more students arrived to learn from the master. The Breton women had come down all the way from the western reach of High Rock. Aiken himself had journeyed across the continent from his home near the great volcano in Morrowind. He showed me the ebony arrows he brought from his homeland. I had never seen anything so black. "From what we've heard," said Copale, one of the Bosmer men, "the Duchess is an Imperial whose family has been here even before the Empire was formed, so you might think that she was accustomed to the common people of Valenwood. Nothing could be further from the truth. She despises the village, and the school most of all." "I suppose she wants to control all the traffic in her jungle," laughed Prolissa. I accepted the information with gratitude, and found myself dreading more and more my first meeting with the intolerant Duchess. My first sight of the palace through the trees did nothing to assuage my fears. It was nothing like any building I had ever seen in Valenwood. A vast edifice of stone and iron, with a jagged row of battlements like the jaws of a great beast. Most of the trees near the palace had been hewn away long ago. I could only imagine the scandal that must have caused, and what fear the Bosmer peasants must have had of the Duchy of Woda to have allowed it. In their stead was a wide, gray-green moat circling in a ring around the palace, so it seemed to be on a perfect, if artificial, island. I had seen such sights in tapestries from High Rock and the Imperial Province, but never in my homeland. "There'll be a guard at the gate, so we'll leave you here," said Aiken, stopping his horse in the road. "It'd be best for you if you weren't damned by association with us." I thanked my companions and wished them good luck with their schooling. They rode on, and I followed on foot. In a few minutes' time, I was at the front gate, which I noticed was linked to tall and ornate railings to keep the compound secure. When the gatekeeper understood that I was there to inquire about a domestic position, he allowed me past and signaled to another guard across the open lawn to extend the drawbridge and allow me to cross the moat. There was one last security measure: the front door. An iron monstrosity with the WOTA coat of arms across the top, reinforced by more strips of iron and a single golden keyhole. The man standing guard unlocked the door and gave me passage into the huge, gloomy gray stone palace. Her Grace greeted me in her drawing room. She was thin and wrinkled like a reptile, cloaked in a simple red gown. It was obvious that she never smiled. Our interview consisted of a single question. "Do you know anything about being a junior footman in the employment of an imperial noblewoman?" Her voice was like ancient leather. "No, Your Grace." "Good. No servant ever understands what needs to be done, and I particularly dislike those who think they do. You're engaged." Life at the palace was joyless, but the position of junior footman was very undemanding. I had nothing to do on most days except to stay out of the Duchess's sight. At such times, I usually walked 2 miles down the road to Molova. In some ways, there was nothing special or unusual about the village. There are thousands of identical places in Valenwood. But on the hillside nearby was Master Hiomaste's archery academy, and I would often take my luncheon and watch the practice. Perlissa and Aiken would sometimes meet me afterwards. With Aiken, the subjects of conversation very seldom strayed from archery. Though I was very fond of him, I found Perlissa a more enchanting companion, not only because she was pretty for a Breton, but also because she seemed to have interests outside the realm of marksmanship. "There's a circus in High Rock I saw when I was a little girl, called the Quill Circus," she said during one of our walks through the woods. "They've been around for as long as anyone can remember. You have to see them if you ever can. They have plays and sideshows and the most amazing acrobats and archers you've ever seen. That's my dream, to join them someday when I'm good enough." "How will you know when you're a good enough archer?" I asked. She didn't answer, and when I turned, I realized that she had disappeared. I looked around, bewildered, until I heard laughter from the tree above me. She was perched on a branch, grinning. "I may not join as an archer. Maybe I'll join as an acrobat," she said. "Or maybe as both. I figured that Valenwood would be the place to go to see what I could learn. You've got all those great teachers to imitate in the trees here. Those ape men." She coiled up, bracing her left leg before springing forward on her right. In a second, she had leapt across to a neighboring branch. I found it difficult to keep talking to her. "The Imga, you mean?" I stammered. "Aren't you nervous up at that height?" "It's a cliché, I know," she said, jumping to an even higher branch, "but the secret is not to ever look down." "Would you mind coming down?" "I probably should anyhow," she said. She was a good 30 feet up now, balancing herself, arms outstretched, on a very narrow branch. She gestured toward the gate just barely visible on the other side of the road. "This tree is actually as close as I want to get to your Duchess's palace." I held back a gasp as she dove off the branch, somersaulting until she landed on the ground, knees slightly bent. "That was the trick," she explained, anticipating the blow before it happened. I expressed to her my confidence that she would be a great attraction at the Quill Circus. Of course, I know now that was never to be. On that day, as I recall, I had to return early. It was one of the rare occasions when I had work, of a sort, to do. Whenever the Duchess had guests, I was to be at the palace. That is not to say that I had any particular duties, except to be seen standing at attention in the dining room. The stewards and maids worked hard to bring in the food and clear the plates afterwards, but the footmen were purely decorative, a formality. But at least I was an audience for the drama to come. Dun dun dun! Hello, Madras. Goodbye. Okay. Next, I think we're going to want to head into Mebestian Ence's place, because he had a couple of books upstairs.
Yes?
No. Here we are. The Pilgrim's Path. The pilgrim must visit each of the shrines of the 7 graces. At each site, the pilgrim must stand before the 3-sided stone triolith and read the inscription. To ease the pilgrim's task, the temple has made this list of shrines along with directions and advice to pilgrims. The blessings of each shrine last at least half a day. The Fields of Camus, Shrine of Humility. Here, Lord Vivek met a poor farmer whose guar had died. The farmer could not harvest his muck without his guar, and he could not provide for his family or his village. So the Lord Vivek removed his fine clothes and toiled in the fields like a beast of burden until the crop was harvested. It is at the fields of Camus we go to pray for the same humility Lord Vivek showed on that day. The fields of Camus are west of Saran on the north shore of Lake Amaya as you head towards Pelagiad. The shrine is between two rocks and most easily noticed while traveling east along the road. Alof's farm nearby has a small dock on the north bank of Lake Amaya. This is the only dock nearby which Alof kindly allows servants of the temple to use. It is customary to leave a portion of muck at the shrine to represent Vivek's humility. To stop the moon, the shrine of daring. When Sheogorath rebelled against the tribunal, he tricked the moon Bar Dao into forsaking its appointed path through oblivion. The mad star inspired the moon to hurl itself upon Vivek's new city, which Sheogorath claimed was built in mockery of the heavens. When Vivek learned of Sheogorath's scheme, he froze the rogue moon in the sky with a single gesture and the grace of his countenance. Overwhelmed by the courage and daring of Vivek, the moon Bar Dao swore itself to eternal service of the tribunal and all its works. Thus, the moon now stands guard over the palace and serves as a citadel for the temple's ordinators. The Shrine of Daring is found in the city of Vivek, in the Temple District, along the western wall of the High Fane, the great temple of Vardenfell. When you address the shrine, it is customary to leave behind a potion of rising force. Suitable potions may be purchased from the temple. Homemade potions are not acceptable. The Palace, Shrine of Generosity. Long after Lord Nerevar and the tribunal triumphed over Dagoth-Ur, the people wished to build a monument to the heroes of that war. Vivek thanked them, but said that it would be better to dedicate a monument not only to the glorious heroes, but to all people, great and small, who suffered and died in the war. It became the custom to make offerings here, either in thanks of our good fortune or for those less fortunate. The Shrine of Generosity is on the top steps of Vivek's palace, the southernmost canton of Vivek City. The customary donation for those in good fortune is 100 gold. The Puzzle Canal, the Shrine of Courtesy. In a battle with Mehrunes Dagon, Vivek gave his own silver longsword to the Daedra Lord rather than dishonor himself by fighting an unarmed foe. This so impressed the Dremora, the most honorable and chivalrous of Mehrunes Dagon's Daedric servants, that they now share a bond of respect and courtesy with the followers of the tribunal, though we must never forget that they are our enemies. The Shrine of Courtesy is found in the heart of the Puzzle Canal, a labyrinth beneath Lord Vivek's palace in the city of Vivek. The journey through the Puzzle Canal can be confusing, and it is suggested that common pilgrims carry a scroll of almsivy intervention in case they get lost. The Dremora Krast is found in the center of the Puzzle Canal, and will accept a plain silver longsword if spoken to with courtesy. After Krast accepts the sword, pilgrims must read the inscription on the trilith. The Mask of Vivek, Shrine of Justice. Near the altar is Vivek's ash mask. In the days of fire, when Dagoth-Ur first crept back into Red Mountain and awakened it, Vivek led refugees here as they fled the ash and blight. Weary, they rested here a while. When Vivek awoke, he found himself and all his followers encased in casts of gray ash. Frozen like a sleeping statue and unable to free himself or help his people, Vivek was filled with despair. Vivek's tears weakened his ash cast. He tore the ash from his perished followers, breathed life into their lungs, and cured them of the blight. This is Vivek's heroism. His tender heart provides strength when his might fails. The Shrine of Justice is guarded within the Nisus Temple, in the village of Nisus, northwest by road from the town of Aldrune. When you address the shrine, it is customary to leave a potion of cure common disease as a token of your respect for justice. Suitable potions may be purchased from the temple. Homemade potions are not acceptable. Koal Cave, the Shrine of Valor. Within the Koal Cave, Vivek fought a battle with Ruddy Man, the father of the Dreg. When he defeated Ruddy Man, Vivek spared his life on the condition that Ruddy Man and his children would give up their tough hides to serve as armor for the Dunmer. The Shrine of Valor is inside the Koal Cave, a cavern on the seacoast west of the ancient stronghold Barandas and south of Nisus. The cave mouth faces south, towards the sea, and is marked by a large natural arch of stone. The region is wilderness, and finding the cave mouth can be difficult. Dreg within the cave itself are fearsome enemies. Only experienced and capable adventurers should attempt to reenact the epic battle with the Dreg in the cave. Dreg wax may be bought at the temple in Nisus. When you address the shrine, it is customary to leave a portion of Dreg wax as a token of Vivek's victorious struggle with Ruddyman. The Ghost Fence, the Shrine of Pride. The Ghost Fence is a lasting symbol of the indomitable will and power of Almsivy and a monument to Dunmer pride in overcoming its enemies. The Shrine of Pride is found within the Ghost Fence, just northeast of the Ghost Gate itself. The safest route to Ghost Gate is along the Foyada Mamea, a volcanic ravine running from the top of Red Mountain southwest to its end just below Balmora. An old Dwemer bridge crosses the Foyada near Fort Moonmoth. A pilgrim may follow the Foyada Mamea all the way to Ghost Gate. Any journey inside the Ghost Fence is dangerous, but even the most timid pilgrim should be safe so long as he does not stray too far from the Ghost Gate and flees from any minions of Dagoth-Ur. When you address the shrine, it is customary to leave a soul gem in remembrance of our ancestors who were bound to the Tribunal's service. And now, the Alchemist's Formulary. Healer's recipes. Healers should all know the recipes for the following popular potions. Fortunately, in most cases, the ingredients are common and cheaply obtained. To restore health to the afflicted and wounded, combine in equal parts 2 or more of the following cheap and common ingredients: marshmallow, wickweed, cork bulb root, and salt rice. Marshmallow is an important crop of the Ascadian Isles, but it also grows wild in the Grazelands and on Azura's coast. Wickweed is a wild ashland grain that grows in the Grazelands. Cork bulb grows best in the Ascadian Isles. Most salt rice comes from southeastern Morrowind, but there are also some new and prospering farms and plantations in the Ascadian Isles. Salt rice occasionally grows wild in the Grazelands and on Azura's coast. To restore fatigue after heavy exertion, combine 2 or more of the following: crab meat, bread, small kwama egg, and chokeweed. Crab meat is taken from the mud crab, commonly found along all coasts. Bread in Morrowind is usually baked from salt rice flour. Kwama eggs are harvested from egg mines and sold everywhere in Morrowind. The smaller eggs retain properties lost in later states of gestation. Chokeweed is a tough shrub growing in the rocky highlands of the West Gash. To cure common diseases, combine grave dust and green lichen. Grave dust is spirit-affinitive dust taken from remains buried in consecrated ground. Green lichen is a hardy primitive plant that grows in the Ascadian Isles and Azura's coast. To restore magicka for spellcasting, combine comberry and frost salts. Comberry is a bitter berry used to make wines. It grows mainly in the Ascadian Isles. Frost salts, by contrast, are rare and expensive. These crystalline compounds precipitate from elemental frost in solution. Such residues may be collected from the remains of frost atronachs that have been banished from the mortal plane. Travelers' recipes. Pilgrims and travelers will find the following inexpensive recipes of particular interest. Feather reduces the weary traveler's burdens and can be gained from heather and scuttle. Heather is a low evergreen shrub of the Ascadian Isles, known for its small, pinkish-purple flowers. Scuttle, Vardenfell's favorite local dish, is similar to cheese and made from the flesh of local beetles. Levitation can be produced from any 2 of the following ingredients: tramaroot, racer plumes, and coda flowers. A thick, bitter-tasting root of the trama shrub grows in the Ashlands, Molag Amur, and Red Mountain regions. Racer plumes are plucked from dead cliff racers. Coda flowers are collected from the primitive draggletail plant of the Bitter Coast. The power of water breathing is handy for travelers. A potion may be made from 2 or more of the following ingredients: luminous rusla, hackle lowleaf, and quamacuddle. Luminous rusla is a squat, mottled brown and green toadstool mushroom of the Bitter Coast region. Hackle lowleaf is a succulent leaf of the Grazelands, prized for its taste and its restorative powers. Quamacuddle is a tough, waxy substance that comes from sacs in the mouths of quama. Adventurers' recipes. Unfortunately, the potions most favored by adventurers require more rare and expensive ingredients. There are exceptions, like the easy and affordable recipe for Fire Shield, but most potions require at least 1 ingredient with high cost in coin or blood. Fire Shield potions can be made from comberry and slowed soap. Comberry is the bitter berry of the Ascadian Isles. Sload soap is a waxy substance made from the immature, non-sentient forms of the sload. Sload soap is not expensive, but is only rarely stocked by apothecaries or alchemists and cannot be collected locally. An adventurer can fortify his strength with a potion made from ash yams and dreg wax. Ash yam is a tough tuberous root vegetable common to the Ascadian Isles region. Dreg wax is a tough, waxy substance scraped from dreg shells. Dreg are powerful aquatic creatures, and hunting them for their hides and wax is a dangerous occupation. Invisibility, one of the most prized effects of potions, can be made only from crushed diamonds and bittergreen petals. Bittergreen is a red flowering plant growing in the Red Mountain region. Diamonds, on the other hand, are very rare and expensive, and usually must be purchased from fine alchemists. That was some pretty useful information. Those are potions that maybe Fedar will be making at some point in the future.
Keep moving.
I will continue moving, sir. Now, we want to head to Adania's house. Because she has some reading downstairs. Okay, let's start with the one that comes first. The Poison Song, Book 5, by Briston Zell. For 2 days the house healers attended Tay in his bed, and Baynara sat by his side, holding his hand. He was feverish, neither asleep nor awake, screaming at invisible phantoms. The healers complimented the young man's fortitude. Bodies had washed ashore on the island of Gorn several times, many during the war, but never once had they seen one that lived afterwards. Aunt Ulaya came in several times to bring Baynara food. "You must be careful, dear, or when he's all well, he'll have to attend you on your sickbed." Tay's fever broke, and at last he was able to open his eyes and see the young woman with whom he had spent 17 years, all but the first year of his life. She smiled at him and called for food. In silence, she helped him eat. "I knew you wouldn't die, cousin," she whispered fondly. "I hoped to, but somehow I knew I wouldn't either," he groaned. "Baynara, do you remember all those nightmares I told you about? They're all true." "We can talk about it when you've rested some more." "No," he croaked. "I must tell you everything now, so you'll know what kind of a monster you call your dear cousin Tay. If there was some way you could have known before, you might not have been so eager to see me well again." A tear rolled Baynara's cheek. She had grown into a beauty, even in the few months he had been away in Mournhold. "How can you think I would stop loving you, no matter what you've done?" "I saw my old nursemaid Edaba, and spoke to her." "Oh." Baynara had feared this moment. "Tay, I don't know what she told you, but it was all my fault. You remember when Kenna Grafisi taught us about the house Dagoth and its corruption? That night, I saw your nursemaid making some kind of altar out on the north lawn using the symbol of the 6th house. She must have been doing it for years, but I never knew what it meant. I told Uncle Triffith, and he sent her away. I've wanted to tell you so many times now, but I was afraid to. She was so devoted to you." Tay smiled. "And didn't it frighten you even more to wonder if there was any connection between her devotion to me and her devotion to the accursed house? I know you, Baynara. You're not one of those women who doesn't choose to use her mind." "Tay, I don't know what she told you, but I think she was very troubled, and whatever she thought about you in the 6th house was wrong. You have to remember that. The ramblings of one madwoman are proof of nothing." "There's more," Tay sighed and held up his hand. For a moment he blinked, and then turned to Baynara angrily. "What happened to my ring? If you saw it, you must have known already that everything I'm saying to you is true." "I threw the filthy thing away." Baynara stood up. "Tay, I'm going to let you rest now." "I am the heir of House Dagoth." Tay was wild-eyed, almost screaming. "Raised after the war as House Indoril, but driven by the song of my ancestors. When we were young, I killed Vaster because the song told me he had stolen my inheritance. When Edaba told me who I was and gave me this ring, I killed her and burned her house to the ground because the song told me she had served her purpose. When I returned to Calcarith's house, my love was there, telling me that she was of the House Dagoth too, and my sister. I fled, and when Calcarith tried to stop me, I slew him because the song told me he was an enemy." "Tay, stop," Baynara sobbed. "I don't believe a word of it." You've been feverish." "Not Tay," he shook his head, breathing heavily. "The name my parents gave me was Dagoth Tython." "You can't have killed Ediba. You loved her. And Vaster and Calcarith? They were our cousins." "They were not my true cousins," Tay said coldly. "The song told me they were my foes, just as it's telling me now that you're my foe. But I won't listen, and I'll keep from listening, as long as I can." Baynara fled from the room, slamming the door behind her. She took a key from her startled maid Hilima and secured the lock. "Sergio Induril Baynara," Hilima whispered with great sympathy. "Is all well with your cousin, Sergio Induril Tay?" "He'll be perfectly fine once he rests," Baynara recovered her dignity, wiping the tears from her face. "No one is to disturb him under any circumstances. I'll take the key with me. Now, I have much work to do. I don't suppose anyone's spoken to the fishermen about restocking Sandal House's supplies?" "I don't know, Sergio," said the maid. "I don't think so." Baynara marched down to the docks and relieved her troubled heart the only way she knew how, by concentrating on small things. Tay's words never left her, but she found temporary comfort talking to the fishermen about their haul, helping determine how much should be smoked, how much should be sent to the village, how much should be delivered fresh to the house larder. Her aunt Ulaya joined the discussion, oblivious to Baynara's well-disguised agony. Together, they discussed how many provisions Uncle Triffith and his commanders had devoured during their weeks on the island, when they would be expected to return, and how best to prepare. One of the fishermen on the docks called out, interrupting. "A boat is coming." Ulaya and Baynara greeted the visitor as she arrived. It was a young woman dressed in the robes of a temple priestess. As she docked her small boat, Baynara marveled at how beautiful she was, and strangely familiar. "Welcome to Gorn," said Baynara. "I am Indoril Baynara, and this is my aunt Indoril Ulaya. Have we met before?" "I don't believe so, Sergio," the woman bowed. "I was sent by the temple to inquire whether word had come from your cousin, Indoril Tay. He has been missing from his classes for some days now, and the priests have become concerned." "Oh, we should have sent word," Ulaya fretted. "He came here a few days ago half drowned. He's better now. Let us escort you up to the house." "Tay's resting now, and I asked that he not be disturbed," Baynara stammered. "Actually, I know it's dreadful manners, but I need to talk to my aunt for a moment. Would it be too terrible if I asked you to wait for us at the house? You have only to follow the path up the hill and across the lawn." The priestess bowed again humbly and began the walk. Ulaya was scandalized. "You know better than to treat a representative of the temple that way," she snapped. "You can't be so exhausted from tending your cousin to have lost all sense of civility." "Aunt Ulaya," Baynara whispered, drawing the woman away from the ears of the fisherman, "is Tay truly my cousin? He believes himself to be of the house Dagoth." Ulaya took a moment to respond. "It's true. You were just a baby yourself during the war, so you couldn't know what it was like. There was not a part of Morrowind that wasn't ravaged. There was even a battle here on the island. Do you remember that burned pile of wreckage you and Tay and poor little Vaster discovered so many years ago? That was the remains. And after the war, when that accursed house was finally defeated, we saw the little innocents, the orphans whose only crime had been born to wicked parents. I admit there were some in our armies, the combined forces of the houses, who would have had them all slaughtered to annihilate the legacy of Dagoth. In the end, compassion prevailed, and the children of the 6th house were adopted into the other 5. And so we thought that we had won the war and the peace. By the Mother, Lord, and Wizard, if all that Tay believes is true, then there is no peace," Baynara trembled. "He claims that the song of his ancestors called to him and forced him to slay 3 people. 2 of them our housemen, Cousin Calcarith and, when he was a little boy, Vaster." Ulaya held her hands over her tearful face and could not speak. "And it is only beginning," said Baynara. "The song still calls to him. He said there were others who knew, who would help him raise up the 6th house. His sister—" "It must be an evil fantasy," Ulaya murmured. She noticed that Baynara's gaze was now upon the path leading from the docks towards the house. "Niece, what are you thinking? Did that priestess give us her name?" The 2 women ran up the path, calling for guards. The fishermen, who had never seen the mistresses of the house so undone, looked briefly at one another and then followed quickly behind, pulling out their hooks and blades. The front gate to Sandal House stood wide open, the first of the corpses lying close within. It was now an abattoir, painted fresh with blood. There was Anner, Uncle Triffitt's valet, gutted but still seated at the foyer table where he had been enjoying his afternoon glass of Flynn. Larin, one of the chambermaids, had been decapitated while carrying some once-clean linens up the stairs. The bodies of guards and servants sprawled about the hall like blown leaves. At the top of the stairs, Baynara had to hold back a sob when she saw Hilima. She lay like a broken doll, slain as she tried to pull herself out onto the narrow window ledge. No one spoke, not Baynara, nor Antulaya, nor the fishermen, as they walked slowly through the blood-drenched house. They passed Tay's sick room, its door broken open, and no one within. When they heard the sound of footsteps in Baynara's room down the hall, they approached slowly, cautiously, with great dread. The priestess from the docks was standing by the bed. In her hand was the silver ring Baynara had taken from Tay's finger. In her other hand was a long, curved blade, splashed like her once pristine gown with gore. She smiled prettily and bowed when she saw she was no longer alone. "Acra, I should have recognized you by Tay's description in his letters," Baynara said in her steadiest voice. "Where is my cousin?" "I prefer to call myself Dagoth Acra," she replied. "Your false cousin, my true brother, has already gone to fulfill his destiny. I'm sorry you were not here so he could give you a more permanent farewell." Baynara's face twisted in fury. She motioned for the fishermen, who advanced with their weaponry. "Tear her apart." "The sixth house will rise again, and Dagoth Tython will lead us," Acra laughed. Her words were still echoing as she gave the sign of recall and vanished like a ghost. But what happens next? The Poison Song, Book 6, by Briston Zell. The magnificent sprawl of the stronghold of Indoranion was aglow in the light of the setting sun. Commander Jazrat watched it slowly disappear into the horizon as he led the caravan southwestward. It was a strange practice for him to lead a night operation, but scarcely more bizarre than anything else he was facing. He was only 70 years of age, far from old for a Bosmer, and yet he felt like he belonged to another era. He had known the land of East Vardenfell his entire life. Every forest, every garden, every small village between Red Mountain and the Sea of Ghosts had been home to him. But now it was all different, twisted into a world he did not recognize since the eruption and the year of Sun's death. It made night travel all the more treacherous, but it was a risk he was ordered to take. The Ashmire appeared quite suddenly. If a sharp-sighted scout hadn't seen it and given the signal, the entire caravan might have been swallowed whole. Jazrat cursed. It had not been on the map, but that was hardly surprising. It was a huge, unnamed scathe stretching as far as anyone could see. The commander considered his options. He might lead his party to the southeast toward Telarun and then try and approach due west. As he consulted his map, he noticed a glimmer of a campfire in the distance. Accompanied by his lieutenants, Jazrat drove his guar forward to investigate what appeared to be an Ashlander man and woman. "This is no longer your realm," he bellowed. "Don't you know it's been ruled by the temple that these are house lands now?" The couple shuffled to their feet and began quietly walking away, toward a narrow ridge between hill and Ashmire. Jazrat called them back. "Do you know a way around the scathe?" he asked. They nodded, their eyes still to the ground. Jazrat signaled to his caravan. "You will lead us, then." It was a treacherous, winding crossing, almost too tight for the guars. The wagons themselves scraped as the drivers pulled to avoid the Ashmire. The Ashlander man and woman whispered to one another as they led the caravan. "What are you mumbling about, Enwa?" Jazrat hollered. The man did not turn around. "My sister and I were talking about the Dagoth rebellion, and she was guessing that you were bringing arms to the stronghold at Fallen Serrano, which is why you chose to cross the Ashmire rather than taking a road." "I might have known," Jazrat laughed. "You Ashlanders are so hopeful whenever you see signs of trouble in the houses and the temple. I hate to dampen your spirits, but what you're speaking of is hardly a rebellion. Merely a few isolated incidents of unpleasantness. Tell your sister that." As they plodded onward, the narrow ridge began to taper even more. The Ashlanders found a low, jagged crevasse in the hills, a crack from a lava flow even predating Sun's death. The caravan scored the rock walls as it moved through. Commander Jazrat, after 20 years of uncertainty in a land he did not understand, felt a twinge of his old instinct. This, he thought to himself, would be a fine place for an ambush. "Ashlander, how close are we?" he shouted. "We've arrived," Dagoth Tython replied, and gave the signal. The assault was over in mere minutes, as it had been calculated from the start. When the last body of the house guard had sunk beneath the ashmire, only then was the inventory of the caravan revealed. It was better than they had hoped, virtually everything the rebellion needed. Daedric swords, dozens of suits of armor, quivers of fine ebony bolts, and rations enough to last for weeks. "Go on ahead to the camp," Tython smiled at his sister. "I'll lead the caravan. We should be there within a few hours' time." Acra kissed him passionately and gave the sign of recall. In an instant, she was back in her tent, exactly as she had left it. Humming the song, she removed the Ashlander rags and chose an appropriately diaphanous gown from her trunks. Precisely the sort of dress Tython would love seeing her in when he returned. "Morasa," she called to her servant. "Summon the troops together. Tython and the others will be here very soon with all the weapons and rations we need." "Morasa can't hear you now," said a voice Acra hadn't heard in weeks. She turned, expertly removed every trace of surprise from her face. It was indeed Indoril Baynara, but not the quivering creature she had left behind at the massacre at Sandal House. This woman was an armored warrior who spoke with mocking confidence. "She wouldn't be able to summon the troops if she could. You may have weapons and rations, Acra, but there's no one left to arm or feed." Dagoth Acra made the sign of recall, but nothing happened. "The moment we heard you banging around in the tent, my battle mages cast a diffusion of all magicka," Baynara smiled, opening the tent further to invite a dozen house soldiers in. "You won't be leaving." "If you think that my brother will walk into your trap, you underestimate his allegiance to the song," Acra sneered. "It tells him everything he needs to know. I have convinced him to no longer fight it, and let it lead him and us to our ultimate victory." "I've known him longer and better than you ever did," said Baynara coldly. "Now, I want to hear what the song is saying to you. I want to know where I can find Tay." "Tython, my lady," Acra corrected her. "He is no longer a slave to your house and the temple's lies. You can torture me all you wish, but I swear to you, the next time you see him, it will be because he wishes it, not you. And that will be your very last moment alive." "Don't you worry, Sergio," Baynara's Nightblade winked at her. "Everyone says they won't break under torture, but everyone always does." Baynara left the tent. It was all a part of warfare, she understood that, but there would be little relish in witnessing it. She could not even watch as the house soldiers disposed of the rebel corpses. She had hoped she would grow numb to the bloodshed after weeks of following Tython and Acra, massacre after massacre. It didn't matter to her that now the bodies were of her enemies. Death was still death. She had only been in her tent for a few minutes when her Nightblade appeared. "Not so tough as she appeared, that one," he grinned. "In point of fact, all I had to do was ask her nice and point my dagger at her belly, and she was blubbering everything. Not too surprising, really. It's always the ones that talk big that crumble fast. I remember way back a couple years ago, before you was even born, Garwin, what did she say?" Baynara asked. The song, whatever that is, told her brother that she got herself caught, and not to return to camp, the Nightblade replied, only a trifle annoyed at having his fascinating story cut short. "He's got a half-dozen mer with him, and they're going to try to assassinate the fella that led the Indoril army in the war. General Indoril Triffith." "Uncle Triffith," Baynara gasped. "Where is he stationed now?" "I'm not sure myself, Sergio. Do you want me to ask if she knows?" "I'll come with you," said Baynara. As they walked towards Acra's tent, cries of alarm sounded. The situation became abundantly clear even before they reached the site. 3 guards were dead, and the prisoner had escaped. "Interesting woman," said Garwin. "Weak heart, but a strong arm. Should we send word of warning to General Indoril Triffith?" "If we can find where he is in time," said Baynara. Bum bum. Okay. And we're done in here. There is one more book in Pelagiad that Fedar needs to read. It's actually in Fort Pelagiad, so now Fedar's got to hoof it back there. That was weird.
May the wind be on your back.
I'm listening.
And now all the way in the back. Ordo Legionis. The most disciplined and effective military force in history, the Imperial Legions preserve the peace and rule of law in the Empire. At need, the Legion garrisons can be swiftly mobilized to protect against invasions or internal disorders, but in Vvardenfell district of Morrowind, the local forts help to ensure law and order, providing guards to supplement the local guard units of the temple and great houses Hlalu, Redoran, and Telvanni. There are 5 Legion garrisons in Vvardenfell district. The 3 town garrisons, Moonmoth Legion Fort in Balmora, Buckmoth Legion Fort in Aldrune, and Fort Pelagiad in Pelagiad, are at full complement. The Hawkmoth Legion garrisoned at Castle Ebonheart is an elite honor guard unit and also at full complement. The frontier installation, Fort Darius in Nisus Village, is currently the only understrength garrison on Vvardenfell. Qualified citizens seeking enlistment in the Imperial Legion should apply to the commander of that garrison, General Darius. The Legion selects candidates on the basis of superior endurance, the soldierly virtue, and trustworthy personality, the citizen's virtue, for service in the Legion is the model for the duties of Imperial citizenship. Troopers are expected to demonstrate mastery of the long blade, the spear, and blunt weapons. Legion troops train with shield and heavy armor, and so must be skilled at blocking and moving in heavy armor. As a trooper or knight, you must master the long blade, spear, and blunt weapons. You must block whatever blows you can and take unblocked blows upon your heavy armor. Recruits must also be proficient at athletics, both to march long distances with heavy packs and to advance and maneuver, charge, and retreat on the field of battle. That was pretty short compared to the handbook for the Imperial Cult. Alright, well, whatever works. And with that, this episode of Storytime is complete.
On your way.
I'm leaving. Gotta get back to where we were at the beginning of the video. So we just read Bone Part 1, For My Gods and Emperor, The Black Arrow, Book 1, The Pilgrim's Path, The Alchemist's Formulary, The Poison Song, Book 5, The Poison Song, Book 6, and Ordo Legionis. Fedar will be getting back on the road to Balmora in the next video. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.